Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou nā man here, no mai, higher mai. Higher mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā kato, tēnā tātou katoa. Be it real or metaphor, whatever is in your backpack or your briefcase or your purse that you brought into this sanctuary that is weighing you down, leave it behind. There we go. Whatever you're carrying that is keeping you distracted or caught up in shame or guilt or hopelessness, leave it behind. If you need it, it will be there when we're done. But for this hour, just let it go. Come into this place with open hearts. Come into this place with a soul that has remembered how to be tender again. Come into this place with a renewed hope for this world. Come into this place ready to build a world we've always been worthy of and have always dreamed of. Come into this place willing to be authentic with each other, honest within ourselves, and open to connection in all its forms. By the light of this chalice, we prepare for the future. We prepare ourselves for the times of triumph and times of trial that might come. We prepare ourselves to be present to one another with loving hearts, even in the most difficult of times. We prepare ourselves to make the connections that will lift us out of isolation and prepare the path of justice and equality. Please join me in the words of our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, sweet to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. And now, let us stand, if able, to sing the Spirit of Life. A lot of us during the lockdown and so on have quit relying on takeout and other things and actually cooked real meals and shared recipes and all that sort of thing. So I thought I would share a recipe by Margaret Weiss, and I've tweaked it a little for my taste. It's called A Recipe for Resilience. Ingredients: 1 part courage, 2 parts tears of failure and doubt, 1 part deep listening, 1 part each of both silence and laughter, 3 parts acceptance of uncertainty, a dash of trust, a pinch of wonder, a heaping scoop of naps and snacks. In a separate bowl, mix together family, friends, and those who challenge you to be your best self, those with whom you disagree. Add slowly to the large pot. Add a bay leaf for, well, whatever it is bay leaves do. And let it simmer for as long as you need, which is often longer than you realize or anticipate. Keep the heat at an even temperature, hot enough to cook throughout, but not so hot it burns the bottom. Can be served at room temperature, warm, or even cold if necessary. Serve alongside your favorite soft blanket, dog, cat, or other soft item. Bake often, share with others, hold on to the leftovers. You'll need them after a long day that challenges your soul. As I shared last Sunday, there are times when the preacher loses control of his talk, not unlike a wild horse taking the bit in their teeth, hell-bent to go where they will. Last week was a wild ride like that. While surprised to have my intended journey interrupted, I was not unhappy where my musings took me. I saw some unexpected sights. Even so, I'm going to try again to reach my intended destination. Like many of us, I have spent considerable time thinking about how COVID has changed the future, both in the short term and for the long term. I don't have a crystal ball for this task, and if I did, this being 2020, it would malfunction, filling with smoke before rolling to the floor and smashing into smithereens. What I do have is current events, and more importantly, history to offer insights. My interest is not just about satisfying idle curiosity. It is about finding hope in such dark times, to feed our resilience, to carry on in a world made unpredictable by a deadly virus. I dare to exercise my foresight because, given my age, I'm not likely to find out how wrong I am. Current events in New Zealand show us how our lives have already changed. We know COVID is a slippery sucker, always on the lookout for a new host. In spite of our vigilance at the border, we know that it sneaked in through the ports last week, threatening our level 1 status once again. Masks, social distancing, frequently washed hands, and using our contact tracing app are going to be part of our daily lives for an indeterminate time. While we have eliminated COVID twice, our strategy will need repeating periodically as long as the virus ravages the rest of the globe. We also know from recent history, the right leadership can create the level of social cohesion necessary to keep us all safe. In spite of over 40 years of vilification by neoliberalism, government once again enjoys the trust of New Zealanders, that it will be more interested in their well-being than in the gross national product. I doubt we'd have a strong progressive government if it weren't for the pandemic. Whether or not this is for the long term or short term, only time will tell. Remember, the crystal ball is malfunctioned, I can't tell you. Whether or not our last election is a bellwether, rigging for a more compassionate and science-based way of governing that other countries will follow is difficult to know. We might get some indication in 9 days when the polls close in the US. But I am more interested in what the world might look like several generations from now. Since COVID-19 broke out, experts and politicians have said that it's unprecedented, or when pushed, compared it with other coronaviruses, SARS and MERS. Many have cited lessons of the 1918 Spanish flu that killed about 50 million people around the world, about 2% of the population. But the Black Death was by far the deadliest pandemic of the past 1,000 years, reducing the world's population from, it was only 450 million at the time, to 350 million in only a few decades. And while this is a grim statistic, the Black Death was also the catalyst for a brighter, centuries-long history that followed up right up to today. By the time the plague wound down in the latter part of the 14th century, the world had utterly changed. The wages of ordinary farmers and craftsmen had doubled and tripled, and nobles were knocked down a notch in social status. The church's hold on society was damaged, and Western Europe's feudal system was on its way out. Because my expertise lies more in church history, let's look more closely at the Black Death's impact on the church as an example. Religious practice in medieval Europe, between 476 and 1500, was dominated and informed by the Catholic Church, the only game in town. The majority of the population was Christian, and Christian at the time meant Catholic, as there was initially no other religion. The rampant corruption of the medieval church, however, gave rise to reformers and new religious sects, condemned by the church. Even so, the church maintained its power and exercised enormous influence over people's daily lives, from the king on his throne to the peasant in his field. The church regulated and defined an individual's life, literally from birth to death, and was thought to continue its hold over the person's soul in the afterlife. The church was the manifestation of God's will and presence on earth, and its dictates were not to be questioned, even when it was apparent that many of the clergy were working far more steadily in their own interests than in those of their God. The church maintained the belief that Jesus was the only begotten Son of the one true God, as revealed in the Hebrew Scriptures, and that those works prophesied Christ's coming. The date of the earth and history of humanity was all revealed through the Scriptures that made up the Christian Bible, considered the Word of God and the oldest book in the world. It was consulted as a handbook on how to live according to divine will and gain everlasting life in heaven upon one's death. Interpretation of the Bible, however, was too great a responsibility for the average person. And so the clergy were a spiritual necessity. In order to talk to God or understand the Bible correctly, one relied on one's priest, as that priest was ordained by his superior, who was in turn ordained by another, all under the authority of the Pope, God's representative on earth. The church hierarchy maintained the social hierarchy. One was born into a certain class, followed the profession of one's parents, and died as they had. Social mobility was extremely rare to non-existent, since the church taught that the hierarchy was God's will. One had to be born into a certain set of circumstances, and attempting to improve one's lot was tantamount to claiming God had made a mistake. People, therefore, accepted their lot and made the best of it.
A dramatic blow to the power of the church came in the form of the Black Death pandemic. People began to doubt the power of the clergy, who could do nothing to stop people from dying or the plague from spreading. Even so, the church repeatedly crushed dissent, silenced reformers, and massacred heretical sects until the Protestant Reformation. And by the way, tomorrow is Reformation Day. Until the Protestant Reformation broke the church's power and allowed for greater freedom of thought and religious expression. It was the end of the age of submission, writes Barbara Tuchman. To that extent, the Black Death may have been the unrecognized beginning of modern man. Man was her word. As Unitarians were leaders amongst the radical reformers of the Reformation, it could be said that we are a child of the plague. I'd like to think that's a good thing. The Reformation was only the beginning of the outcomes from the plague. Historians link both the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution to the conditions made possible by the Black Death. And yes, horrible things also happened in its wake. Anti-Semitic pogroms, misogynistic witch burnings, zealous religious wars, bloody revolutions, and soul-shattering famine were all part of the post-plague landscape. Things had changed for better and worse. What changed most was the seemingly unchangeable, especially for people who until then had been largely invisible. What had been fixed in place was all at once not fixed in place. As we try to discern the shape of the future, this phase of history is increasingly looking like that one. What will happen when more and more people work from home, emptying huge office buildings in city centers? How will a growing gig economy impact and transform the labor movement, nearly decimated by neoliberalism? Will automation and robotization make room for more meaningful work or increase unemployment and poverty? How will educational institutions function on campuses no longer necessary? How will religions change to meet this very different world if they're capable of change? Will globalization lose its hold on world economies? Will technology be used for evil as much as for good? Will our plague give impetus to create a greener world? As human beings, will we become despondent, despairing, and uncaring, cruelly acting out our embitterment on the innocent? Or will we find hope and sustenance through connection to diverse communities? The questions go on and on without answer, for we don't know what we don't know. What we do know is that we have to take a long view, knowing none of us alive today will see the final outcomes. We need to dispense with wishful thinking. We need to hold fast to our Unitarian values born of the last great plague and make choices along the way that further a brighter future for the children of our great-great-grandchildren. It is both the least and the most we could do. Namaste. Let us stand for our closing hymn.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until one at
My closing words are by Marjorie Newland Levy. Let us go forth through a door of hope for the future, remembering these words by Martin Luther. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. So may it be.